Hey guys, we're starting with chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Elemental's Power. Last video we did chapter 2, and I think I'm going to stick with this routine where we're doing each video has one chapter in it because these chapters are really long and I didn't realize that. So expect about 62 videos in this series because there's 62 chapters in this book. So what happened in chapter 2 was Harry Potter just turned 6 years old, and on the night that he turned 6 years old, he had a very strange dream with these people talking, and one of them resembled his father. And that man said something along the lines of, he will grow up to be a strong wizard, referring to Harry Potter. So this is how Harry Potter realized that he was a wizard, and this would explain all of the weird stuff that happens when he's scared and angry. So what happened in chapter 2 was it was his birthday. No one really acknowledged it. He was given a whole bunch of chores to do. Um, Later on, while he was in the playground, Dudley and his friends beat him up, and he pushed Dudley and his friends against a wall with his powers, except he didn't realize it. He didn't know what's going on yet. That's when he realized the dream would make sense that he was a wizard and all this happened because of that. So he got excited, but when he went home, he got beat up by his aunt and uncle because of what he did to Dudley. And then the following morning, he tried to practice his powers. 2 months after that, he managed to create an ice sphere with his powers, and that's when we realize that he is an ice elemental. So that's what chapter 2 left off with. So we are starting off now with chapter 3. Chapter 3, The Letter. 23rd of June, 1991. It was the crack of dawn when a pair of green eyes slowly opened, blinked thrice, and looked around the room groggily. Harry Potter then rolled off his bed and dragged his feet to the bathroom to bathe, before Dudley woke up and finished all the water. 15 minutes later, he came back to the room all freshened up. He sat by the windowsill thinking about the last 3 years and to observe the majestic sight of the sun slowly waking up from its little slumber. Harry had been moved to the smallest room in the house over 3 years ago, when he had finally learned how to use and control his magic to a certain level without getting exhausted. He had asked his uncle to let him move to the smallest room in the house, as he felt the cupboard was becoming too small for him. His uncle had gone purple in the face and tried to hit him for asking such an absurd question, but found out that his hand flew over Harry's head. Head. The reason for his miss was soon discovered as he was floating 4 feet above the floor. He was then flung across the living room and he crashed I'm not gonna try that, on the floor, breaking a few tiles in the process. That had gotten his uncle and aunt's attention, and soon Harry found himself to be the proud owner of an actual room with a window and a bathroom. Performing that piece of magic left Harry feeling lethargic for a few days, but he got what he wanted and it also made life a little easier. That little incident was enough for the Dursleys to start being civil to him whenever they saw him or just outright ignored him, which suited him just fine. His last 3.5 years were relatively peaceful, but that didn't stop his aunt from giving him chores. But he didn't mind as long as they were letting him stay in a room with a window and allowing him to eat proper meals. "Are you up?" came a demanding voice of his Aunt Petunia. Yeah, I'm up. Coming down in a minute," Harry grumbled. "Well, you better hurry. Today's Dudley's birthday, and I want everything to be perfect. I don't want you doing any of your you-know-what." Today was Dudley's birthday. How could he forget? He knew he better be on his best behavior, or else he would be living on the streets before he could even make the slightest form of protest. Magic or no magic. He went downstairs to find all of the Dursleys around a pile of presents, all for his pig of a cousin named Dudley. He quietly sat on the table and ate his eggs and bacon while watching Dudley count his presents. His face fell. 37, he said, going red in the face. That's one less than last year. Aunt Petunia sensing a tantrum. Oh god, I am so bad at this. Aunt Petunia, sensing a tantrum coming, quickly said, "We'll buy you 2 more presents while we're out today. How's that, Pumpkin? 2 more presents, is that alright?" Dudley thought for a moment. Looked like hard work. Finally, he said slowly. Bleh. Finally, he said slowly. "So I'll have 39 sweetums," said Aunt Petunia, her voice coated with an overabundance of sweetness that Harry found revolting. "Oh." Dudley sat down heavily and grabbed the nearest parcel. "All right, then." Uncle Vernon chuckled. "Little Tyke wants his money's worth, just like his father." "Attaboy, Dudley." He ruffled Dudley's hair. The phone rang and Petunia answered it. Harry looked at her interestedly, as her expression went from joyful to crestfallen. "Bad news, Vernon. Mrs. Figg broke her leg. She can't take the boy," she said, jerking her head in Harry's direction. "Well, what about your friend Yvonne?" he asked. "On vacation in Switzerland," she barked back. "Well, it looks like we'll have to take the boy with us then. We can't leave him in the house. God only knows what will happen to the house if we do that," she said, looking at his uncle. Dudley began to cry loudly. In fact, he wasn't really crying. It had been years since he'd really cried. The last time he had cried was when Harry had blasted him back when they were 6. But he knew that if he pretended to cry and wail, his mother would give him anything he wanted. Dinky Duddy Dums, don't cry. Mommy won't let him ruin your special day," she cried, flinging her arms around his large waist. "I don't want him to come," Dudley yelled between huge pretend sobs. He always spoils everything." He shot Harry a nasty grin through the gaps of his mother's arms. Just then the doorbell rang. "Oh, good Lord, they're here," Aunt Petunia said frantically, and a moment later Dudley's best friend Piers Polkiss walked in with his mother and sneered at Harry. As soon as he walked in, Dudley stopped pretending to cry at once. Half an hour later, Harry, who couldn't believe his luck, was sitting in the back of the Dursleys' car with Piers and Dudley, on the way to the zoo for the first time in his life. His aunt and uncle had not been able to think of anything else to do with him, but before they left, Uncle Vernon had taken Harry's side. "Boy, I don't want any of your freakishness happening around today. Do you hear me? You keep your nose clean and we won't give you any chores tomorrow. Do you understand?" "Yes, Uncle, but only if Dudley manages to not push me around," Harry said firmly. Vernon's face turned blue in anger, but he gave a short nod and stomped back to the car, beckoning Harry to follow him. On the way to the zoo, his uncle kept complaining about rash drivers and youngsters on motorcycles, making Harry remember his dreams about the flying motorcycle, and how his life had changed after that. Harry had the best morning he had in a long time. He was careful to walk a little away from the Dursleys, so that he could watch the animals in the cages without being pushed or whacked in the head by Dudley, who would then claim it was an accident. By lunchtime, both Dudley and Piers were bored, and they decided to have lunch in the zoo restaurant. After lunch, they went to the reptile house. It was cool and dark in there, with lit windows along the walls. Behind the glass, all sorts of lizards and snakes were crawling and slithering over bits of wood and stone. Dudley and Piers wanted to see huge poisonous cobras and thick man-crushing pythons. Dudley quickly found the largest snake in the place. It could have wrapped its body twice around Uncle Vernon's car and crushed it into a trash can. But at the moment it wasn't moving at all. In fact, it was fast asleep. Dudley stood with his nose pressed against the glass, staring glistening brown coils. "Make it move," he whined to his father. Vernon tapped the glass sharply, but the snake didn't budge at all. "Do it again," he ordered, and his father rapped on the glass harder, but the snake still didn't move. "This is boring," said Dudley, and quickly shuffled to a different window. The snake suddenly opened its beady eyes. Slowly, very slowly, it raised its head until its eyes were on a level with Harry's. It winked. Harry stared. Then he looked He looked quickly around to see if anyone was watching. They weren't. He looked back at the snake and winked too. The snake jerked its head towards Uncle Vernon and Dudley, then raised its eyes to the ceiling and spoke to Harry. I get that all the time. It must be really annoying, Harry murmured through the glass, feeling a bit bewildered about talking with a snake. Where are you from, anyway? It nodded its head towards the signboard, which read Boa Constrictor in Brazil. Oh, how is it over there? He asked. Never been there, the snake replied. I was born and grown in the zoo itself. Harry was sympathetic to the snake's plight and replied, Oh, that's sad. Well, I better get going before someone sees me talking to you and freaks out, 'cause I sure haven't heard of anybody ever talking to snakes before. Bye then. Adios, amigo. You are interesting and one of I like how I just changed my accent. You are interesting, one of your kind. I hope we meet again, the snake hissed back at Harry, walking away towards Uncle Vernon. He then saw Piers looking at him weirdly. You were talking to the snake, weren't you? I heard you hissing at it, said Piers. Harry just looked at him and slowly walked away, pondering over what Piers had just said. You were hissing at it? Was he speaking a different language, or was just Piers pulling his leg like he usually did? He heard his uncle calling him and went back, forgetting all about what Piers had just said to him. 2 weeks later. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen the next morning when Harry went in for breakfast. It seemed to be coming from a large metal tub in the sink. He went to have a look. The tub was full of what looked like dirty rags swimming in grey water. What's this? He asked Aunt Petunia. Your new school uniform, she said. Harry looked in the bowl again. Oh, he said. I didn't realize it had to be so wet. Don't be stupid, she snapped. I'm drying some of Dudley's old things grey for you. It'll look like everyone else's when I've finished. Harry seriously doubted this, but thought it's best not to argue. He sat down at the table and tried not to think about how he was going to look on his first day at Stonewall High. He sighed and decided to go practice, summoning little bigger things like toys and big books. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in with wrinkled noses because of the smell from Harry's new uniform. Uncle Vernon opened his newspaper as usual, and Dudley banged his smelting stick, which he carried everywhere on the table. He really was a spoiled brat. They heard the click of the mail slot and flopped letters on the doormat. Get the mail, Dudley, asked Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. Make Harry get it. Get the mail, Harry. Make Dudley get it. Poke him with your smelting stick, Dudley. Harry dodged the smelting stick and went to get the mail, grumbling about pigs and jerks. There were 3 letters, a postcard from his Aunt Marge to Vernon, a brown envelope which looks like a bill, and a thick letter with his name written on it? Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging? Sorry. The envelope was thick, made of yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembling, Harry saw a purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding a large letter H. Hurry up, boy, shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. What are you checking? What are you doing checking for letter bombs? He chuckled at his own joke. Harry quickly stuffed the letter down his pants, knowing his uncle would want to read it first, and took the remaining letters to the kitchen and handed them over to his uncle quietly. He then slowly walked back to his room and read his letter, knowing who on earth knew him out there. Harry locked his room and pulled out his letter and read it, not noticing the owl sitting just outside his window. He broke the seal and pulled out two thick parchments and began to read. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer. I'm good at reading, I swear. Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederation of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress, What the hell? Harry wondered. He took the other parchment and began to read that too. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First-year students will require 3 sets of plain work robes, black, 1 plain pointed hat, black for day wear, 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar, 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes should carry name tags. Course books. All students should have a copy of the following: The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1 by Miranda Goshawk, A History of Magic by Bathilda. I'm not going to say the names. Magical Theory, A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration, 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi, Magical Drafts and Potions, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Hey, that's a book. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection. Other equipment: wand, cauldron, pewter standard size 2, set glass or crystal philas, telescope set, brass scales. Student may also bring an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. Harry was shocked. He could not believe his eyes. There was actually a school for wizards like him. Hell, there were even more wizards and witches out there, and here he thought he was the only one with such powers. He was trembling with excitement and read the letter again and again. It was like a dream come true. Hold on, he thought suddenly. What was the part that said they await his owl no longer than 31st of July? Do I have to write a letter to them, or what? He thought out loud. Suddenly he heard a tapping noise on his window and spotted the owl outside. He jumped up from his bed and fell on his knees. He went quickly and opened the window with one hand and rubbed his knees with the other. The owl flew in and stood on his table and stuck its foot out. Harry looked at it strangely and asked, "Do you want me to send them a letter right now?" A hoot gave him all the confirmation he needed. He quickly took a sheet of paper and a pen and wrote, "Dear Professor McGonagall, I received your letter and will be very happy to attend Hogwarts from the 1st of September. However, I did not know where to get my uniform and the rest of my equipment. I would be glad if you could send someone over sometime tomorrow so that I can go and buy my school items. Thanking you, yours sincerely, Harry James Potter." "Yep, that looks alright," said Harry, rereading the letter. He then rolled it and turned it to the owl, which immediately flew out of the open sky. He stared outside the window and suddenly burst out laughing, happiness radiating out of him. "I'm going to learn more magic! And who knows, I might actually make friends for once in my life. And best of all, the Dursleys! What else could I ever want?" he said to himself, still giddy with excitement. All he had to do now was announce the news to the Dursleys and convince them to let him go, hopefully without him having to use his magic against him. He took deep breaths, counted till 10, and calmed himself down. He reached out to his magic and willed it to flow through his body, feeling the rush of power that always came with it, knowing that he was going to need it if his talk with his aunt and uncle was to go well, without him getting any major injuries. Harry put the letter back inside the envelope and went downstairs. All the 3 Dursleys were sitting by the television watching a movie. Give me a second. Oh, God. Okay. Aunt Petunia, Uncle Vernon. He got no response, so in a still louder voice he said again, "Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia." "What do you want, boy?" grunted his uncle, still staring at the TV. I got a letter today." The reaction was spontaneous. Immediately his aunt gave a strangled gasp, and his uncle fell off the sofa while Dudley was still staring at the television as if nothing had happened. "What did you just say?" Uncle Vernon growled. "I got a letter today, accepting me into Hogwarts School of Magic," Harry stated bluntly. What? Spluttered his uncle. "And," Harry said, raising his voice a bit, "someone is coming to pick me up tomorrow." That said, he handed over a letter to his aunt, who didn't say a word but just stared at the envelope like in a trance. "How dare you! How dare you come down and presume that we will send you to some crackpot magic school and learn how to turn us into God knows what. You will go to Stonewall High, just like me and your aunt told you. Do you hear me?" Harry just stood there waiting for his uncle to finish his rant. Are you done? He asked him. What? Asked his uncle, still huffing and panting after that rant. I said, are you done yelling? Because no matter what you do, I am going to go, and if you try to stop me, well, I'm sure you remember what happened almost 3 years back, don't you, Uncle Vernon? And you, Aunt Petunia, Harry said with the threat clear in his voice. Both his uncle and aunt just stood there watching him with their mouths opening quite stunned, and didn't know what to say. Now, you look here, boy, growled his uncle, but Harry just raised his hands and levitated the two adult Dursleys and said, You were saying, dear uncle? Both his aunt and uncle were now looking terrified at Harry's feat of magic. But Dudley still hadn't realized what was going on, as he was quite enjoying the movie he was watching. Harry just stood there waiting for his uncle to say something while he started sweating slightly, knowing that he wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. All right, yelled yelled his aunt, panicking and finally finding her voice. Petunia? Whimpered his uncle. Please, put us down, and you can go to that freak school of yours. Harry smirked in victory and dropped the two Dursleys down. His uncle, now back on the ground, got his courage back and came stomping towards Harry, but found himself unable to move when Harry raised his hands and pushed outwards towards him again, making him slam into the wall. His uncle crumbled into a heap on the floor, moaning in pain. Tomorrow a professor will come and take me to buy some stuff. I'll leave on the 1st of September, and you won't see me until summer, Harry said, looking straight into his aunt's eyes, knowing that they would be really glad to get rid of him. She quietly nodded her head and hurried to Vernon to see if he was all right. Harry then turned and started walking back to his room, knowing that he had just won an important battle. He wiped the sweat dripping from his forehead due to all the magic he just exuded, and went to lay on his bed, knowing that tomorrow was going to be the greatest day of his life. That was a lot of reading and a lot of bad reading. Alright, we are done with chapter 3. Next video will be chapter 4. Alright then, hope you enjoy that. Bye!